Hello, everyone. Welcome to another weekly live stream from your friends here at Hygraph. My name is Bryan Robinson. I'll be your host and live coder today. Today is going to be a little bit different from some of the ones we've had in the past few weeks. Recently, we've done very serious, very product-oriented, very launch-focused types of streams where we have, last week we talked about the launch of our live preview functionality. We did a little live coding around that, but very serious topic. Week before that, I think we had a partner on. We've been doing some very focused streams. Today is going to be slightly different than all of that. We're going to be looking at a new piece of functionality, not from Hygraph, but from our friends over at Astro, one of the amazing new meta frameworks that are out and about these days. They just launched a new piece of functionality last week called their content layer API. We're going to be taking a look at it. Spoiler alert, I have done some prep on this, but there's a lot that goes into this, and there's a lot that we can explore past the basics. So starting today, we're going to be doing the absolute basics, and then we'll kind of expand from there, take a look at the functionality as in-depth as we can as we go forward today. Let's dive in a little bit. Like I said, it's going to be a little bit of a cozy stream. I even have some background music playing. I've got some mint tea, so make sure you grab something tasty for along the way here. But we're taking a look at the Astro.build website and their blog post that came last week from their 4.14 launch. I love semantic versioning, right? 4.14 just rolls off the tongue. The main thing, like I said, that we're going to look at today is this experimental functionality. Let me zoom in a bit here. So they have this thing called their content collections. If you're familiar at all with Astro, this is the way that you primarily deal with the markdown files inside of your project. You create a content collection from markdown file, front matter. Front matter is type safe, which is a super cool feature of functionality inside Astro. And then you pull that in. It's data that you can use in any of your templates and any of your pages, loop through it, pull specific information, all that good stuff. And you wanted to do third-party data, you did not use this kind of content collection information. And so what the content layer API is doing is a few things. First, they're making some big changes to the way it's handling the markdown. I don't know what's going on behind the scenes there. A lot of good stuff. You can see here they're talking, a big part of this is performance for how it's handling markdown files. And you can see here that they've got some benchmarks here. I'm not exactly sure on the benchmarking process that they're using here. In the old way, build times for a lot of markdown files were in the hundreds of seconds, 136 here in 4.13, and that's been cut down to like 25 seconds. So a sub 30-second build time, I think, is actually a really great thing to shoot for. There are AI generators out there that are even faster than that. But they're also not quite as fully featured in this way as Astro. So that's one of the main things they're doing, right? They're refactoring the way their content collections are built behind the scenes so that they can do that. But the other side to it is this idea that you can bring in your own loaders. So you can see like they're doing this thing here where they're doing their own custom loader on the Markdown and MPX. However, you can create your own loaders from any third party, such as Hygraph. We do it today. We'll build a little, what they call inline loader, and then we'll look and see if we can refactor it into its own kind of externalized loader as well. And as we go, make sure you ask any questions that you've got on the way. Hi, I'm Arshan. You can pitch writing for Hygraph. Head over to our Slack channel, and you can talk to us there. You can join the community over at slack.hygraph.com. We'll talk there. Our demand gen team handles that sort of information there. So we're going to build this kind of like this inline loader today for our Hygraph data. And then we'll also take a look at the proposal overall. There's a lot of interesting things in here. It should be very strongly noted, and the reason this is a low-key stream today is that this is an experimental feature. It seems like it's making really good progress, and it's going to be fully baked in the very near future. You can see it's already in their stage 3. And you can see it was only started less than a month ago. So I really like that they're making this much progress in this experimental. I also like how they're working on it in the open. They've got their summary of what they want to do. This is really important for figuring out what this is even for and not for. So yeah, a lot of good stuff in here, a lot of cool stuff coming. Like I said, we're going to focus on loaders and figure out what that looks like today. I'm going to be using our implementation guide demos that we have, and you can find those in our documentation, which you can find at the link right there down below. And this is basically, these are the simplest implementations you can do in many frameworks. We have, I think, 6 frameworks there. And when I say simplest, like, it is a home page and a dynamic route, and that's it. I think that's a good place for us to start our work today as well. And you can see here that I have it pulled up already. I've already cloned it, and I've already behind the scenes made a clone of the Hygraph project as well. All this is available in the implementation guides in our documentation. You can go grab those and kind of start from this point as well. Again, super simple. You can see our page has a string, a slug, and rich text. That's it. And again, this is a separate piece of that implementation. So the first thing we need to do is, this is actually running, as you can see here, an older version of Astro. I'm going to go ahead and upgrade this to 4.14. Astro luckily has that built in, npx Astro.js / upgrade. Let's see, we've got a breaking change. I've already done this on other things, so I know this MDX change isn't a big deal. So we'll say yes to that, and we'll let it do its thing here. Like I said, if you have any questions along the way, do let me know. If you're not familiar with Astro, it's a really great static site. It's a meta framework, right? So there's a lot of server-side stuff, but it's an HTML first meta framework, which I think is a really cool piece. So you can see we're now on Astro 4.14.3. Houston, their fun little CLI friend, has told us to have fun, so I think we're good there. And just because I always like to restart the server just to make sure. And I will say this very much is experimental. Like, you should know that I'm not planning us building an integration using this in the near future, because I'm also seeing some error handling issues and some other stuff that obviously they're still working towards. In playing with it, I've broken it a lot, and I haven't gotten the most descriptive of errors back, or sometimes it's failed silently, which is always exciting. So again, experimental, don't use this in your projects yet, but definitely something fun to start thinking about for the future. All right, so we've updated that. You can see here I've got my Hygraph endpoint inside my .env file. So let's take a look at how this is currently set up. So we have a dynamic route in our page directory, so that we basically get /page/slug. You can see here that we're initializing the client. Again, this is very simple. I haven't abstracted this out to its own file. If you want more information on that, I actually did it last week, so go check out the VOD for our live preview over in YouTube. But you can see this should actually be our environment variable, right? Let's go ahead and change that out. So this will be import.meta.env.astro Hygraph. This should just work, but who knows? And then you can see we have all that here. I can come into the framework and it's still pulling in. So we're good to go there, no errors. But this is really what we're going to be replacing today. We don't need to make this query everywhere. And in fact, we're actually duplicating this query on our home page, right? Go ahead and replace this while we're at it, to get the pages that I can then build links to. In fact, on this page, I really don't need the body, but that's neither here nor there. We're using this on the home page to generate the list of links. So I'm doing this duplicate work. Again, I can abstract that out, but I'm going to abstract it out in this new methodology toward this idea of the content loader API, or the content layer API. So if we take a look at the blog post, let's take a look at how they're doing this creating a loader section. Again, this is a very, very simple thing they've got going on. We first need to enable, which I forgot to do, in our Astro config, we need to say we're going to have this experimental functionality. Hey, Angie, welcome back today. Good to see you again. All right, so I need to go into my Astro config file, and I've got my Tailwind integration here in my defined config, but I'm also going to take this experimental object, set content layer, which is content layer API, set that to true. And that's going to tell Astro that we're going to do it this way. Then we're going to create a new file in a new folder, actually, because this project doesn't have a content folder. Content is where in Astro we're going to store our markdown. But because we're not doing any markdown in this, we do need a content folder where our config can live. So you can see here, this is the config. It lives at source, content, config.typescript. So let's go ahead and add that in. So source needs a content directory with a config.ts file. All right, so we got our configuration file. And what we're going to do in this file is create a configuration that defines out a series of collections. In this case, it's just going to be one, but I could define a new content collection maybe for every model in Hygraph. Again, I only have the one. Or I could create one big content collection for all the content in Hygraph. There's a lot of different ways that we might think about doing this in the future, again, as we get this as a more stable feature in Astro. But you can see I'm going to copy all of this. We're not going to use it, but I want to have it available as a reference over here. And you can see what they're doing is they're setting a new variable called countries. We're going to call it something different. They're using the define collection, which we're going to need to import. I'm not sure why they don't include the import there. And then we're going to, inside of that, have a loader that's going to have an async function. So let me go grab that import and copy it just so we've got it. At the top of our file, we need to import define collection from Astro content. I'm going to go ahead and keep this Z. The Z stands for Zod. It's a way of creating schemas and typing for anything that kind of comes through here. We're fairly type safe in what we're going to do today, but we'll also set up, again, depending on time and depending on if there are any errors along the way in this cozy stream today, we might define out some types so that if things change improperly inside of Hygraph, let's say somebody changes the schema not to require a field, we do want our build to break on that. We want to kind of showcase that. Otherwise, we'll get an error on the front end that we don't want. So I'm gonna go ahead and get rid of all the information in here, and just this idea that we do need a loader. You can see it even talks about the schema here. So the loader is going to be an async function. And if we come over to our reference here, you can see that that there's this idea of a loader, and a loader can be one of two things. And again, this is in kind of the RFC for how they're doing this. It can be an inline loader, which is what we're going to do first, or it can be a loader object, and the loader object gives us a whole bunch of additional functionality for how this gets worked with. Right, there's some logger information, there's a logger function, there's an actual store method that you can mess with the store on. You can do a whole bunch of stuff there. My guess is if we get to that point today, I'm gonna break a lot of things because I have been playing with it a little bit on the side and I've broken it quite a bit. I have gotten it working, but I've also broken it a lot. So we're gonna start with the inline loader because it is the absolute simplest way of doing this. And you can see in their RFC, that same code that we had from the blog post is included there. So a few things that we need to do here. We're going to go ahead and grab from our page here a little bit of information. So we need a client and we need this query because this is where we're getting our data from. So let's go ahead and grab all this in. Let's move it over to our config file in our async loader here. I do need to import GraphQL client. And again, abstracting this out would absolutely be beneficial into its own client folder there. So we're going to initialize our client and pass it our Hygraph endpoint, which again exists in our .env file. You can see it's here. All that's pulling in. You can hard code it, but again, some best practices are probably important. Then we're going to take that client. We're going to make a request with our query here, and that query is going to hopefully return some pages. Because this is technically TypeScript, I probably should have made this a JS file just from the beginning. We want that to define how I type there. That only will break on us, I believe, if we're building, not if we're running the dev server. So I'm going to leave it for now. We'll come back to it later. So let's go ahead and console log the pages that we're getting back, make sure we're getting that. And we do need to restart our server. All right, so we're breaking things. That's perfectly fine. That's to be expected. You can see we are getting back the pages. And the reason it's breaking, and this is kind of like where I get into the error handling. Error handling needs to be a little bit better before this is fully ready for prime time. what's happening here is that I'm not actually returning back, as TypeScript is telling us up here, the proper structure. In fact, I'm not returning back anything at this point, and I do need to return back information. So the one big caveat here is that whatever we're returning back, and whether that is either an array or an object with IDs for the indexes, which I'm trying to find, that's defined out here somewhere. But basically what I need to do here is must return an array of entries with an ID property or an object with IDs as the keys and entries as the value. So right now I'm not returning anything. I do need to return back my array, but I need to make a change to my query because I'm not actually including an ID here. Because for the most part, I was using the slug as my unique identifier, but luckily every single entry inside of Hygraph has an ID. So we'll add that in, we'll be ready to return that. And then we will return out our pages array. And the pages are an array that should be properly formatted for what we need at this point. Save that in, don't need to restart the server, just need to start it up because we were erroring before. No errors, and nothing will have changed at this point because I'm not using this anywhere. So now let's get rid of countries. That doesn't make any sense, right? Let's make this pages. And we can come down and we can replace countries with pages. Now we're exporting that as a collection. And the interesting thing here is it's actually not coming back as the array that I just put in there. And we'll get into that here in a second. This is one of the first kind of gotchas I had in kind of working through it. Astro is going to take the array and it's going to format it how it expects it for its collections. So this will be formatted in the same way Markdown data gets converted into a collection as well. So we're going to come into our dynamic route here. And you can see we actually are not going to need any of this anymore. We've moved it. I'm going to try not to hit Command S and save this while it's broken. And then we've got this idea that we need paths. And again, we are inside of a get static paths method here. And that's again how these static pages get generated. So we need the paths to be from the new data, right? So what we're going to do is we are in our front matter going to import some stuff from that Astro collection. We're going to import, and some of this is kind of like what you would do if you were using your Markdown files, right? But I need to be able to get my collection from the Astro content, right? This is the get collection method. We're going to pass it the string of the collection that we just made. So to get our pages, so we'll have a pages const here. We need to we actually need to await this, await get collection. And this is a method. The method is just going to take a string, and the string needs to be a key of my collections I've created. Any collection really, so this could also be a Markdown collection at the same time. So we know that we need a pages identifier here. I think that's where I named it. Let's double check that. Yep. The fun thing is when I was doing this before, I was returning back a singular page there as the name, and that was really blowing my mind when I was working with this before. So we're going to const pages equals await to get that collection, and now let's console logs. We're actually going to get an error here, I do believe. The pages array that we're getting back, I'm going to save that in, restart, and try to load up this individual page. You can see here, this is broken, and it's because I'm getting data back not as I originally was in my kind of regular methodology here. So pages, as it comes back here, has the ID, the collection name, data from it, and then potentially an optional rendered. And if we get to the point where we do the individual loader, like the object-based loader, rendered is something that we can actually pass in. We can actually take our body, right, and render it in that function, and then pass back something that you get as content, like you would for your Markdown files, which I think is it feels like overhead, but actually there's some cool stuff that we can do with it. So we do need to now reformat what we expect out of this. So instead of looping through pages, which is sorry, we are going to loop through pages, but we need to get the data off of it. So inside of our paths, right now I'm just doing this implicit return, which becomes a little bit of an issue as we try to do this. What can we do here? We can actually go in and on our params, instead of page.slug, there's now this data object, and the data object is all of our data. So here we're going to have page.data.slug, and then for the props, I could either return back page, which is everything, or I could return back the data. Let's go ahead and keep it at page, just in case we do get to the point where we can pass a render into that, because that will come through in a different spot. Save this, can't read text, and then we come down here and our page is going to have data as an interstitial piece on all of these as well. So page.data.body, and that's it. Again, if I were refactoring probably a bigger code base, I would probably come up here and name these things maybe slightly differently so that I could pull the data separately as well. But now we're back. We have this working. It is exactly as it was before. But I could also like add some random data in if I wanted to, or I could combine multiple APIs or something along those lines. So if we go to our config, we're returning back pages, but each of the pages I could probably modify. So if we wanted to, we could come in and say const modded pages equals, we'll loop through the pages. Let's go ahead and implicit return on this as well for an object where we'll spread out page, and then we'll add in test variable and just be like, hey y'all, oh, hey you, there we go. And then after this, let's close everything properly here. We'll return back modded pages. And then we should now have access to that variable. So we can have like an H3 that is page dot, oh, I'm on the wrong page. Head back to slug. Add a new H3 here that is page.data. What do we call it? It's amazing how fast I forget these things. Test variable. And there it is. So again, like if I needed to modify this, get my data from Hygraph, make a modification, that's also how I might come in and think about taking like the raw JSON from a rich text field and doing some conversion work before it gets over here in that sense. So yeah, so that's kind of the basics. But the nice thing, right, is that I no longer need to do that kind of business logic, that logic of grabbing my information and modifying it here. I can actually bring the same information, the same idea. In fact, let's go ahead and get rid of GraphQL client from there and come over to my index page. And because I have all of this inside of Astro's collections, again, I don't need to run this query again. I can actually return back that same information from the collection. So const pages equals, let's do this real fast. And we're going to, instead of awaiting the client, we can actually await, again, the get collection, spell things properly, of pages. And then again, down here, we've got the pages, and we do need to modify to be page.data. And again, I could just remap this and it would be just fine. .title. So now on my home page, all of this is pulling from that as well. And to prove that, let's go ahead and have this be with page.data.test variable. I think that's what we called it. There. So that test variable is pulling through. So again, that's just kind of a proof point on the fact that we're pulling the right data there. So a lot of things are happening behind the scenes here too. That is all being fully cached by Astro in new ways, which should speed up your development process, should speed up your build process and all of that. So we had this working now. So we can start now, I think, experimenting with it. But I do want to pause for a second and just say, hey, anything I've done so far, confusing, weird, you don't quite understand, what's the reasoning. Part of the reasoning is, hey, new fun technology, right? But do post over in chat if you do have any questions about what's happening either behind the scenes in Hygraph or inside of Astro. And I'll do my best on the Astro side, and maybe the Hygraph side I'll do a little bit better. But hey, for me, getting this done in maybe 15 minutes of working, the refactor done, I think is pretty solid, especially if y'all are familiar with my streams where we muddle through sometimes. So yeah, there's a lot that's happened there. We've gotten all of our data coming from one source. I could make a whole nother set of data if I needed to, but it's all based on now this collection inside of that. So here's where we're going to get real experimental. And that's why I wanted to pause for a second for any questions you might have had. I'm not sure I'm going to accomplish what I'm going to try for next. It should be relatively easy. And it should be not a whole lot different than what we currently already have, but it's going to open up the door for more functionality. So what we're going to try to do is come into this idea of the loader object instead of the inline loader, which is an async function directly there that returns an array. What we're going to have is we're going to have an object for our loader that's going to have a few pieces of information built into it. It's also going to have more functionality built into it. It's going to be a little bit more complex to build. Like I said, error handling, not where I want to be quite yet for this. Again, it's experimental, but there's a lot of cool stuff, and I really want to see if we can kind of like push into that as we go forward. So the idea, and we can see it down here, is that this is a separate file. I'm going to see if I can do this inline too. I think I can. I'm not 100% sure, if I'm being honest, but we're going to try it that way just for simplicity. But you can see, like, right off the bat, the thing that we're returning here from this function is it has a name, and the name is actually what's going to be used in loggers. And you can see there is a load property on this, which accepts an async function. And that async function then gets all of these new arguments. A lot of things happening. We're not going to deal with a lot of them today, but it does have the store and the logger that we'll probably take a look at. One thing we should do, which is, I think, a nice thing. Let's take a look at the typing. I should have done that before moving on. So let's not move on yet. Let's set a schema, which is going to have the information that we need for typing all of this. Now, we're fairly type safe because we are coming from an API that we control. But if we don't make that API properly, maybe the data is not as good as it should be. So having a little bit of typing on this end is also important. So the schema is going to be a Zod object, which doesn't look like that, right? It's a method that inside of that has an object. I'm gonna pull up a little bit of a cheat sheet because I'm not the most familiar with Zod. So z.object, and then inside that we're actually going to define out what this object should be, which we're trying here. And let's see. Yeah, pretty good. So you can see here that GitHub Copilot is really trying to do my work for me. But we have an ID, it's a string. We have a title, it's a string. A slug, it's a string. Body, it's an object. We're getting the data back from Hygraph. But you can see inside of that, we are getting a string back. Then test variable, which we're adding, which I'm actually really impressed with Copilot for, because I didn't do that while I was working on it myself, just testing all this stuff out. It recognized it and sees it as a variable as well. And again, that's not coming from Hygraph. That would be something that we are building in, which is again why this type safety might actually be important, because we are merging data inside of that function currently. So if we were to look at this, if we needed body to be different, we might, add our HTML down here. It would also be a Z string, but we do know that some of these are required. So inside of Hygraph, the title is required, but the interesting thing on this is that coming from Hygraph, it might come through as a blank string as well, if we remove the requirement of that field in Hygraph. So instead of doing, I think it would be like, required error, title is required, which we'll go ahead and keep, that's fine too. What we're also gonna do is we're gonna say that it needs to have a minimum character count of 1. and this could actually be like type safety around your content too. We can actually go in and say like, we desperately need you to make 15 characters at least for your slug or for your title. And then what I can do is I can pass an object. Let's see if this will help me out here. It has a message. The message will be title is required to be at least one character. So this actually gives us two different errors, which I think is kind of nice. If we get it with no data, which is possible if I create it and don't fill it in. When I just clear it, I actually keep a blank string in there from the Hygraph side. So this would actually give me two different error messages, so I could debug that better later on. You'd want this to also be on your slug, and then you also probably put in some custom validation around that. I wonder, do they have a slug? No, they don't. So we'll keep it as a string, because it is a string, just a special string. So we're going to save this. Nothing should error right now because everything is currently type safe. Nothing really changes here in terms of what this could be. If we wanted to test it, we could definitely get a break right off the bat by going into our config, and instead of having the test variable be a string, we could add an integer here, right? And there we start getting some errors, I believe. Let's see, here we go. So I'm not actually handling the rejection. I absolutely should, but we are now getting an error. Instead of allowing this to go through, our build process is saying no, like error, and expected type string received number. And you can see it's coming from test variable. So super handy, especially since we're doing all of this, kind of behind the scenes stuff in our data layer there. But here we are back working, and then we could go into our schema here and say that, let's say an editor got in here and it's like, I really need this one page not to have a title. We're like, hey, that's cool, editor, but we really need it. So we could come in, we could add a new piece of content. Let's do it that way. With no title, actually, let's just have a fake title for a minute and then get rid of it. Oh, it's all tied together. Let's refresh the page. All right, so the slug will be fake page. This is body copy, and we can save and publish this. And then when Astro realizes what's going on, it is going to, I believe, error for us. Which I don't know if it'll error until we maybe load the home page, or because it's cached and doesn't know yet, I need to save this page. Let's restart the server. And there we go. We do get the error. You can see the build doesn't work. And here again, because we expected it, the title was null coming through. And then if we want to see a different version, let's just add a string, save and publish, and then remove. And this will send it through as a blank string. It's just, quote, nothing, quote. And this should give us a new different error. Yep, here it is. Title is required to be at least one character. So again, it didn't actually get this required error, so maybe I'm doing that wrong in Zod. That's entirely possible. Again, not somebody who's super familiar with Zod at this point. But there is our error message, and here it is right there as well. So let's go ahead and make sure this doesn't happen. Let's go ahead and remove this page. We don't want it. And let's go ahead and make sure that this can't happen again, because again, we have control of our API. That's something that we can do. You can see here, as I make this required again, Hygraph knows, right? You need to have something. So we'll just put our own little migration note here, just in case one didn't exist, and save that. So now we got to actually start the server back up because we did completely break it. And when it comes back up, we should be good to go. And we are. Cool. So again, we've now made this type safe on this layer as well as our GraphQL API. They are both now matching. If we got really into this, and again, if we do come back and look at making it like a full integration around this after it's no longer experimental, I'd say that what we would probably do is make an integration where we do code gen, right? We make it so that When you load this up, we generate all of your queries, we generate all the types, and we pass all of that into this schema object and into the loaders that we create for you. Again, just some thoughts around that. We're nowhere near that at this point because experimental, and once the API stabilizes, we'll look deeper into that. But yeah, super interesting stuff. Now we look at breaking it. As I promised before, I know there's some new joiners to the call. What we're going to do is we're going to go from what I view as actually a relatively easy piece of functionality, which is the inline loader, into this new loader object that gives us a whole bunch of additional pieces that we get to play with. So we'll come down here and you can see, I'm going to try to do this inline. Whether it works inline or not, I'm not sure. So that's the first step here. And then we're going to go, and actually what I might do is, let me get a console log so I've got maybe a piece of data to play with. Console log pages, so that maybe I can do this statically to begin with. Let's grab this entire array, and then when we come into the loader, we'll use this array. Again, just so that I've got a better chance of making this work piece by piece. Actually, let's go ahead and commit so I can revert to this if I need to. Git add all this, git commit working version with inline Astro loader. Again, I might want to, like I said, I might mess this up so bad that we got to just start fresh. I'd rather start fresh from here than go elsewhere. So the loader, again, is expecting either an async function here or an object of a specific type. So let's come back here, and schema exists here, and I'm wondering if it will need to exist there. I think that's where it comes in. You can see actually schema, what we're going to do is we're going to have schema, and then there's this idea of the parse feed, which we're not going to look at quite yet, but that parses it against that schema. So we get type safety baked throughout, very, very Astro oriented here. All right, so the loader is going to be now, hopefully, an object. It's already complaining. Let's see. Type is not assignable to loader, or... Okay, it understands this is not what the loader should look like. That's fine. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a name, and we'll call this, for now, Hygraph loader. And then we need to have a load. I'm seeing what type's giving us here. There's going to be an async function, and that's where we're going to do our work. We're going to return back this array, and it doesn't like that. Okay. Am I returning? I am. Type supposed to return a promise is not assignable to type loader context promise void. ID string data is not assignable to type void. Interesting. Again, this might be because it's expecting something different. I'm kind of curious to see how this breaks too. Because again, I'm very curious about the way they're handling their errors right now. Collection pages does not exist. Yeah, this is where I was running into fun yesterday about kind of this silent error. Pages does not exist because my defined collection here is currently technically broken. So we have this, an async function. All right, well, let's see if it's even getting in here. And again, this is super experimental stuff, and I'm not entirely sure what it wants. Okay, so it did get in there. Here's our console log. So the return, the static return, is what it doesn't actually want to see, which is interesting to me, because I feel like this is what we were returning before. Let's take a look at the spec, though. Maybe it wants to parse the feed to be able to work. That might be what it expects to do. Oh, and then yeah, we don't need to return something. We need to set the store. That's what needs to happen. Okay. So what we're going to do is we need to pass into our function here. Let's go ahead and grab our logger, which I know exists on there, and we want the, what was it called? Store, right? Go ahead and get the store off that object. So now instead, we still want to keep the console log because we want to keep testing to make sure that we're in there. But we're going to use the logger to send. What did they use for their logger? They've got these other methods on here. I want to make sure that I follow what they do. Logger.info. Cool. Logger.info. And we're going to say starting the load process, something like that. And then what we need to do is we need to take our store, and we're going to set our store to be equal to this array, I believe. And again, doing this statically, I'm not 100% sure. Ooh, it doesn't like that still. Let's go ahead and maybe make this const static array equals, let's make it all of this. And then we're going to take that and we're going to pass it into our set as the static array. And argument type. Okay, so it doesn't like that. Oh, because it needs to be individuals. I need to loop through it and add an individual onto each of it, if I'm remembering correctly. Let's see, that's what they're doing down here, I believe. Yeah, they're doing all that from within this loop here. All right, that makes sense. So what we'll do is we'll pretend like this is coming in dynamically, right? And instead of store set here, what we're going to do is we're going to take our static array, we'll do a for each on it. And it's really trying to help here, but that's absolutely not what this should look like. Store.set. And then I think I can just pass it the page. So I think the page is already formatted correctly. Let's take a look at what it does. It takes the data, they're using an RSS feed, I think here. Yeah, they're using an RSS feed and they're doing some stuff around that. They're taking the data they get and then they're running it through. They're making an object for each of them that has an ID and the data. So our static array has an ID and the data. We don't need collection on each of these because that should get added for us. Okay, so we got the static array. And again, I think this is all working. I could go ahead and move into the dynamic portion of it because I'm getting some stuff. But I do want a full working version in this way. So then we get the for each, where we take the page and we're just going to return the page in the store.set function here. All right, we got a full. That's good. Let's get rid of this. We don't need this running anymore. Make sure all your promises have an await. That is probably what's happening here. Although I don't think I'm doing anything that is worthy of an await. Unhandled rejection. Okay. Here's the stack trace for unknown file system error. All right. Immutable data store, content layer. This isn't await worthy. I'm not doing anything there. It really does think that's a problem. So let's see. What are we doing in their example here? Come in. They first clear the store. Let's do that because I feel like that's important for later on. So in my load, after I say that I'm starting the process, let's go ahead and store.clear. That's not going to fix our issue. Then we take it. They're doing an await on a parse data. I'm not using parse data yet. They're doing a digest. I'm not doing that yet. That's more for doing incremental changes. You get a digest and you can actually compare older versions to your current version and only do an update. Again, the cool things that you might be able to do with this later on. Then they're just doing store.set and they're setting it with the ID and their data. They're doing a render on it. We're not there yet. All right. Let's go ahead and try to parse the feed, because again, we need to do that anyway, because we do expect it to have type checking on that. So they're doing that inside of the loop. So let's see what happens when inside of our loop we're going to check that. So they're saying a new variable, I believe. Yes. Const data is equal to await parse. Did I not bring parse with me? No. Let's do parse. Parse data, I believe, right? Yeah, parse data. And then the parse data here. And we're going to pass it page object. I think we can just pass that straight up. And then at this point, we can't do it this way anymore. We do need to do a static loop for it as opposed to the helper. So let's go ahead and grab this because I haven't done an actual regular loop in a while. So we're going to take page from static array, and then we're going to loop through that, do these things on it. Maybe this is the problem with having done it the way I did it in the first place. And then we're going to pass the data to store.setPage. We're going to get an error again. That's okay. Expect to type object, received type array. Interesting. Because body. Interesting. All right. And here we've got type error. So it's not recognizing data correctly here. So let's take a look at what data is equal to currently. And let's see. Let's get some room. We can get the proper log. We need to restart it. Oop, don't git commit. npm run dev. There we go. And again, we're in that fully experimental range. All right. Let's see. Loading data from Hygraph. The signature is store.setID. But I thought that's what I was getting from here, right? Each of them has an ID and each of them has a data. Chris, you might be right. I might not be doing this quite correctly, but I thought it would just kind of work that way. So instead, what we can do is we can set store, and like you said, it's expecting an object that has the ID and the data. Doesn't like the ID. No value. That's right. Cause it's it would need to be ID : data.id. All right, we're not. I stand corrected. This might exactly be the issue. No, we're still broken, but from matter does not match collection schema. And again, this is that parse data. The parse data is what's catching this and complaining about it. And it's expecting the body to be an object. And I feel like the body is an object, I thought. Static data, y'all. It's not an actual object right now because I just grabbed static data from the console and we've got this, right? That's absolutely not what we need. Let's see if just removing it, because it's not a required field, this should bring us back. Body's required? I didn't make body required, did I? Down here. My Zod object isn't, but okay, that's fine. Because all I have to do is add text with a string on each of these. So let's add an object. Would this have just been easier if I had done it the correct way? Yeah, this would have been easier if I had just been pulling the data dynamically. All right. Okay, there we go. Use inspect value. Yeah, no, absolutely. I should have done that. I wouldn't have thought about inspect. I would have done JSON to string probably. But yeah, that's what I should have done before I copied it. And then I copied it and wasn't paying enough attention. But again, this should be dynamic, right? I should be actually making my API call, and I will. We got 10 minutes. I absolutely can get that done now that this is working. So we go to any of these pages. This is a test because I just added that in. So all of these exist now in exactly the same way they existed before. including this test variable, is included in there, which when we change this to dynamically pull, it won't be there. So let's go ahead and let's not get rid of the static array yet. Let's build out actually loading our data. So, I wish I hadn't deleted all of that. So we can say const, call it pages equals, we'll do our, we do need to await new GraphQL client. In this case, again, we're going to do import .meta.env.astro Hygraph endpoint. And why am I doing this here? That's not where that goes. This should be our client. And then our client is going to, we do need a query. You are right about that. Let me pull something from off to the side real fast because I deleted it and I shouldn't have deleted it before. Page query is going to get all of our pages. Let's not call it documents. That was stuff I was playing with, trying to make this universal. And then we're going to say, now we get our const pages equals await.client, client.request page query. Oh, it was. Okay. Sometimes when the it's doing this new stacking thing inside of VS Code, and it didn't actually update that I was using page query, and I was concerned for a second. So we're getting pages again. We should be type safe on that, but I'm not going to do that for the moment. So theoretically, let's go ahead and log out pages so that I can take a look at it and make sure I'm getting what I expect. I appear to be, so that's great. Get rid of that again. Get rid of the console log here. And now we can, instead of parsing page and getting it from static array, we'll actually get it from pages. And we'll say data is going to be equal to the parse data here. And I think then the like data.id, because it's not structured properly, we need to parse data on this in the same way, I believe, if we take a look at what they were doing in their roadmap. Parse data in the same way. So we can take this and we can say ID is equal to page.id and data is going to be equal to page. And I think that's fine for the store set. We do have an error. Test variable is required. We have an actual good type check here because we do expect, not in this loader, the loader where I'm writing my code, but down here in this schema, we do expect test variable. But I don't actually want test variable anymore because that was just for us playing around before. So I'm going to remove that type check. And now I'm going to go ahead and restart just for my own peace of mind. Now we'll come in, go back to our local host. And you can see here, we still have that dash, but I'm calling that variable for that test variable on the front end, and it's not there anymore. And I removed the type check, which probably means I should have gone in and removed the actual variable call here. So we'll get rid of that. We won't have that dash anymore. And now what I can do is I can do a little bit more work. One thing you'll notice in my console here is that I've got that logger. So I can actually, when this completes, and again, I should have some error handling in here, right? I should check, I should do a try around my my Hygraph API call, return out an error there. But for now, what I'll do is I'll just have a good success message. Let's see where we are here. I need to go back to config. So after all this runs, assuming I don't get another error and don't throw an error, which again, I should throw an error. Maybe we'll continue work on this next week, if I'm being all honest. I don't know if I have a plan for next week's stream yet. So here, once this succeeds, let's go ahead and get rid of static array. We don't need that cluttering up our code base anymore. Then we can say logger.info. And we can actually say, let's make this a template literal string instead. My favorite part is this typo came from GitHub Copilot. Like, come on, y'all, what's up? All right, finish the load process with store. Let's see if store.size is a thing. I don't think it is. What do I get off the store? Database abstraction for the actual. Okay, that doesn't help. I wonder if there's a length. no. Though I am curious to see what I get from the store. So let's console log that as we do this other thing. Log store, just so I can see everything that's available. But really, for now, what I'll do is I'll take a look at our pages.length for the number of pages that we think we're adding at least. So here we go. Hygraph loader finished the load process with 3 pages. And what else is on the logger? There's errors, I know. There's info. Let's see. Logger, Astro. We've got info, warn, error, debug, level. That's interesting. I don't know what would come back on that. And fork integration logger. Interesting. Logger level just returns back when I'm okay. So that would be more for like doing programmatic builds there. So yeah, there's no success. I feel like success would be a great method to have on the logger, but that's fine. Logger info. Okay, so now we start our load. Let's get rid of our console log. We don't need that anymore. So get rid of this because we have our logger. And when that runs, we get Hygraph loader saying starting the load process. And then we have when it finished with 3 pages. So again, I get this new functionality by doing the object method as opposed to the inline async method. And I'm not 100% sure. So one of the things I tried this morning before stream, so I could talk about it today, would have been, do these exist on that async function as arguments? They do not exist on an inline function there. So it only exists as this idea of the object, because we also get the name, because we get a whole bunch of other things in there as well. Let's see, what is, loader has type, schema, which type is not for us, and the loader. So that's about it. But then again, it gives us this additional functionality for being able to add in things here. Let's see. Dryuni, a success is an event. Some cases you want to log a success message only while debugging to not clutter your user's terminal. In other cases, you want to be an implement. That's fair. And again, I'm not thinking best practices, right? I'm just thinking, hey, I'd love it to be a slightly different color. It's the designer in me. You're right. That's not necessarily the best way of going. Astro thinks much more in terms of best practices than I do, for sure. You're absolutely right about that. Good call. Not really a log level. Yeah. So again, like I get all these additional pieces of functionality. There's even more in the load method that I get here. Like I said, there's this parse data which checks it against my schema for me. I don't have to do the schema checking, which I think is super handy. It also, let's see, what else do they pull in this? They've got the store, and the store itself, we didn't actually inspect that, right? Store has the get method for getting, things. So I could actually look at, I believe I could get an old version. There's the entries function, there's the values, keys, the set functionality we've already done. I could delete items from it if I needed to, do a full clear check. I believe, again, I haven't dug into this section yet. Has appears to be a function that I can probably go in and say, do you have an item in the store that matches this ID? If so, delete it. If not, create it. Various programmatic things around that. Interesting that it has some asset work here. It has module imports. So again, I haven't dug fully into a lot of this yet, but a lot of really cool functionality for extending Astro in a meaningful way. And with that, like, we're literally at the hour, and I'm super pleased with the progress that we made. So yeah, I think this is really cool functionality from Astro. I really appreciate that they're thinking not just of how to do this with their markdown, which I know that's a big deal for them, but like letting third parties start doing this. It's a little reminiscent to me in a nervous way of the way that Gatsby handled some of their stuff. But as long as I don't have to build a loader, as long as I can still do the dynamic stuff in my front matter and all of that, I think this is great. I think this is a really cool abstraction. I think that it builds in some good developer ergonomics. And I think that it's going to make the ability to do these loaders very meaningful. I think there's a lot of stuff that's going to come from it. Again, I've run into enough issues of having to update some of Hygraph's old Gatsby stuff and not being a huge Gatsby developer, and like it just doesn't work without some of this stuff. I don't want Astro to ever get to the point where it's like I don't work without this, but just the idea that I'd be able to do something super meaningful for users of Astro and Hygraph and have them get these things available very quickly, and even just like single button click to get these in, I think could be very, very cool and much, much easier than if I didn't have this functionality. So yeah, I think if we do end up doing more on this next week, which I'm kind of jazzed about, like getting this far has made me pretty pleased. We'll probably look at the render function, and if we get a render function built properly, then I think we can do something that I've done in the past, not with Hygraph, but with other headless CMSs, where I mix and match my my markdown that I have locally with third-party API data, and getting all of that together in that render function with that content tag is actually something I'm rebuilding my personal site with Astro right now, and it's a hurdle I had to get through there. And Bryan, I'm guessing you're on the Astro team, maybe working on allowing integrations to inject content layer definitions. That's pretty cool. I like that idea. Cool. So y'all, I appreciate you you hanging out with me today. We only had an hour. We got things done in an hour, and then I'm continuing to talk. So there's this idea that you'd be able to just Astro add your thing. I also love the CLI, and I love the ability to add and all the things that it gives me already. So anything additional there makes me very, very happy. So a couple quick call outs like I usually do at the end here. If you're interested in what we talked about today or anything Hygraph related, come join us over in the Slack for our community, slack.hygraph.com. As I mentioned before, the starting point for all the things I did today are in our docs, in our implementation guides, specifically for Astro on this one, but we also have Next and Nux and SvelteKit and Remix and Flutter. So we've got six on the bigger side there. Do go check those out. Everything that we did today obviously was a very low-end version of what Hygraph can do. It's all available on our free accounts. And yeah, that's it for this week. Again, super happy that y'all showed up. And let me know if you have any additional questions as we move forward. So thanks a lot, y'all.